Welcome and thank you for joining us for Women in Wages Negotiating for What You're Worth. I'm Christine Kelly. I'm the Director of Career Development, and I'm joined by
I'm Lee Schroyer, Employer Outreach Coordinator and Internship Coordinator with their Career Development Office.
Yeah. What we're going to do today is I'm going to set up first, give you just some facts about women and wages. Some of this is probably things that you might already know. But after we do that, then we'll get down and dirty about how to actually prepare for negotiations so that you know what to do to be effective in your search. Technical difficulties. All right. Okay, so things to know about women, besides the fact that we're great. Women are 47% of the workforce. We also hold 49.3% of all jobs. We hold 58% of bachelor's degrees, 58% of master's degrees, and 53% of PhDs. But despite all of that, we actually earn only about 80% of what a man earns. That has increased slightly in the past couple of years. It used to be down in the 70s, so it's getting better, but still an issue that needs to be contended with. And when they look at the gender gap information, just in case you're wondering, when they look for education and other factors that might come into play, what they actually have found is that the smallest differences and gaps are between people with the least education, and the biggest gaps are among those with advanced degrees. So some of that makes sense because on some level, the federal government sets guidelines and states do for what you can pay someone for minimum wage. But when you go into things that aren't hourly positions, there really isn't any kind of guideline for what you should actually pay a person. They found the Council of Economic Advisors have found that industry and occupation can explain only about 20% of the gap, and that 2/3 of it is not explained by potential experience, age, race, education, industry, or occupation.
One of the important reasons we're talking about this today is because one fact that may explain some of that wage gap is that women just don't negotiate as much as men do, and they also don't tend to negotiate as well for themselves. They negotiate better for others. In one study, they found that 57% of men negotiate offers, but only 7% of women do.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we get told constantly that we need to be nice and polite, and it's not polite to ask for things that were not offered to you. But when it comes to your salary, there are polite ways to ask for what you're worth, and women need to learn how to self-advocate because no one else will do it for you. A few other facts I want to share with you. Equal Pay Day. So this is the date when a woman's salary catches up to a man's salary from the previous year. So this will also demonstrate that gender is one factor, but the other factor is also your race and ethnicity. So on March 5th, Asian American women will catch up to what men earned the previous year. On April 19th, white women catch up. On August 22nd, Black women catch up. On September 23rd, Native American women catch up. And on November 20th, Latinx women catch up. So you can see that for Asian American women and for white women, we have caught up to what men earned the previous year. Black women, Native American, and Latinx women are still waiting for that to happen. So this again just shows the disparity. And again, to really show that it is a combination often of race and gender. It's never one thing. And Lee and I were talking the other day, and there are a lot of other factors that can also play into salary differentials between people. But right now, this is the one that's the most looked at and studied is gender and gender, race, and salary. So you can see that overall, men tend to do better than women in terms of pay. But Asian American men and Asian American women overall do better than every other racial group, and then white women, then black women, and Latinx women. And I think Native Americans didn't make this particular lists, but they would probably be in there somewhere towards where the black and Latinx people are. So that's something to also think about as well. And another thing I wanted to point out in this also is that there is a penalty for women when they have children. So a woman who has a child will see her wages decrease by about 4%, even when a variety of factors are taken into account. And that's according to a report by a group called The Third Way. So that means an average working woman will lose about $1,200 in earnings for each of her children. When a man has a child, however, his earnings will increase by 6% with the same factors taken into account. So men do better if they have children, women tend to do worse. And women and kids, a statistic, putting off childbearing by even just a year can result in a 9% increase in career lifetime earnings for a woman. And men, single men, when they have kids, they'll see their wages jump when they have kids. So again, lack of parity that's important to understand in how this process works. So those are the things you need to know about women and wages. Here's some things just in general about negotiation that you want to think about as well as you go through the process. That I know it's challenging, it's hard, especially if you've never done it before, because it's uncomfortable doing anything for the first time. So sometimes that can get in the way of whether or not it's okay, and sometimes a lack of information. But thinking about the reality of negotiation and how that works will help. So here's some facts. 90% of employers have never retracted an offer because an entry-level candidate tried to negotiate. In fact, most employers expect that. So 74% of employers do have room to increase their first offer by between 5 and 10% during negotiations. And again, it's 74% because that's not always the case. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about the process of actually negotiating. And then other things to think about, there are non-salary benefits that you can negotiate for as well. So schedules, paid time off, bonuses, stock options. We'll talk about these things a little bit more depth later. And 80% of students and grads who negotiate are at least partially successful. So it doesn't hurt to try as long as you do it the right way. And that's part of what we're going to talk to you about, is how you actually do it the correct way. So it's important to think about some of those things as you're going through and trying to work. And Michelle Obama, when she was First Lady, tried to help, or Barack and Michelle, I think Barack did it mostly, the Paycheck Fairness Act. Because currently what happens, I don't remember if this passed, I think it didn't, but you can actually get fired from some jobs for talking about your pay. And so he wanted to make that illegal so that people could share, because part of the challenge in this whole process is the lack of transparency. And so that's one of the things that does need to change.
So we're going to talk about some things that are negotiable beyond just the normal salary. So one thing you can start talking about is bonuses. And this is something I've done in my career. When I was first hired on as a manager, I talked to the owner I was working for about increasing profit of the store. So if I increase the profit of the store, I asked him, could I get a portion of that as a bonus? So that would incentivize me to do it. And I also argued to get my assistant manager some bonus too. So I got that successful in that case. In another case, I was told there are no bonuses for supervisors, so I did not work for them. Another thing you can ask for, especially coming out of college, this happens a lot in consulting firms, is ask for a signing bonus. Something to get you started in your career, because there's going to be a gap in that first month or so when you're waiting for that first paycheck to come in. You can talk about what the stock options are at at the company you're working for. If you're at a higher management level, there might be stock options you can get. But there's also your 401k. 49% of employers with 401k plans don't match anything. 41% do match somewhere between 0 and 6%. And then 10% match at 6% or higher. But the median is about 3%. So you can talk to them about that and see what the options are.
And one little thing I want to add with the stock options to think about, a lot of startup and tech companies will do that kind of in lieu of pay now. We'll give you something maybe later. And even thinking about how big a subset of your portfolio in your retirement is your stock options. That is actually a tricky one. My sister worked for Fremont Bank, which is one of the banks that went under during the housing crisis, and all of her retirement when she was there was in stock options. So when that happened, it wiped out her entire 401k for the company. So think about that. And also for startups, one day that might be worth some money, one day it might be worth nothing. So
you're taking a risk.
Yes, you're taking a risk. So know that going into it, that it can be tremendously valuable or maybe not.
Nothing. Well, another thing you can think about on the stock options too is time to vesture. Most companies that I have heard of will be 1 or 2 year vesture. Some companies will try and get you to sign on for 5 years, but not that many anymore. A lot of companies realize it's hard to keep people around for 5 years hanging on in hopes of getting more or your stocks to vest. One of the other things you can think about is healthcare. In 2018, company provided almost $7,000 a year for single coverage. On average, employers paid over 80% of that for $5,600 a year, and employees paid the other 18% or $1,200 a year. So find out how much of your health care the company is going to pay for.
And if you have an opportunity, like if you have a partner and you're covered under your partner's benefit, then if you don't need the health care, you might be able to negotiate a slightly higher salary based on that argument that you don't have to cover me.
Some other things you can think about are relocation costs. Are you going to have to move to New York City? That's a very expensive trip to make. So is the company willing to help you move out there and get some corporate housing maybe for the first couple of months while you're looking for a good place to live? You don't want to live in a hotel if you're moving to a different city. It's not cost effective. Talk about your vacation or sick days, or if they call it PTO. The difference between those two is PTO, it's everything lumped into one pool. So those are sick days or vacation. Find out how many days they offer. And be careful of the unlimited PTO offers, because it's not as great as it sounds. A lot of those companies that have those, you can take as much time as you want, ends up, studies have shown people actually take less time off when they offer that option. So be careful of that. One thing I can talk about from personal experience is if you're in a situation where you have a contract, talk about a severance agreement if they decide to sever that contract. In California, it's very difficult to do that, but you may be working in a different state. So make sure you're talking about that and get it in writing before you sign. And for international students, do they sponsor your visa? You can, even if you're in STEM and you have 3 years with an organization, if they don't sponsor H-1B visas, they just got 3 years out of you, and now you have to find a different option with very limited possibilities of going somewhere else to sponsor a visa. So, step one of negotiating. The first thing you always are going to have to do is you're going to have to research your salaries. And there's a lot of different options now that I wish I had available 25 years ago. You need to research the industry you're going into. You can research the specific company you want to work for. and look at the position type you're interested in getting into too. And also, in some of these websites, you can look at it by region too. And I'm gonna point out a couple of websites where you can do that specifically right now. If you go to, can you click on the tab, the Paycheck City tab up there? Okay, go to Paycheck City and scroll up to the top real quick so it'll show the different options. There's a lot of different options up top there to look and research your different salaries. The one we're on right now is called the dual scenario salary. If we scroll down a little bit, what I did is I put in annual gross pay of $75,000. And in this situation, we're comparing Arizona on the left and California on the right. So we're being paid $75,000 in each state. What it does, we put all the settings the same. The net pay after taxes in Arizona is $55,000 or almost $56,000. In California, you're only going to be getting a little under $53,000. So a difference of just about $3,000 a year. Now, that's a little bit different. You want to pay for a little bit cooler weather, but
in Arizona, it's cooler?
No, you're paying a little bit more to live out here in California. But if you go up to this other one I was talking about, there's a lot of different sites. This one's on NerdWallet. So this is, you currently live in California. You're thinking about living in Phoenix, and your current salary is $75,000. So in Phoenix, to maintain the same standard of living you have here, you need to earn less than $50,000 a year. And the reason for that, if you look at the bottom, this number really pops out. The average rent for an apartment in LA, for two-bedroom apartment, is almost $2,800. In Phoenix, it's only $1,100. So let's say you have an offer in California for $75,000 and an offer in Phoenix for only $60,000. Well, that may not sound that great to live in Phoenix until you realize that's actually $10,000 extra you'd be having in Phoenix to live off of, rather than being out here. So make sure you're looking at and doing a fair comparison of the offers. San Francisco is even worse. You'd have to have even a higher salary to live up there.
Yeah, I've heard recently they say the poverty rate there is 120,000, or what they consider the minimum threshold you need to be able to afford to live in that city.
So you can, I don't want to move up to San Francisco. So research the company's HR page for the benefits information. You can find out a lot of information. You can also do informational interviews with people within the organization if they're able to talk about the benefits. Some companies may or may not allow their employees to do that. So you need to know what your needs are versus your wants. If you need a higher number of vacation days, if you need a higher salary, what's the salary you need? You need to go in and know what salary you need in order to, you need to have your high expectations of your salary, but high realistic expectations. Wanting six figures a year when a salary range is around $80,000, that's very hard to negotiate. You always want to be positive in your negotiations and use a collaborative negotiation approach. Collaborative approaches, there's a few different factors in there. You want to be candid, open exchange of information with the people. Let them know what your wants are. You need to make sure you're satisfying their interests. Make sure you know your assets can fit the skills of the job and what the company needs to do through this role. Identified a lot of different options. We talked about a few of them in that slide before, and there's other options you can negotiate too. And make sure you're relying on facts and data. Do your research beforehand so you know what type of salary you're talking about. Mm-hmm. If the average salary is $70,000 for 5 years experience, you're not going to want to go in asking for a $90,000 salary because it's not going to be reasonable. And it's going to be really off-putting to organization.
Yeah, most of the stuff we've been talking about so far is industry focused. I mean, some of it works if you want to be faculty. There's some different things that you would negotiate in a faculty position that you wouldn't necessarily in an industry position. But as you think through the needs versus wants, if you've been pretty much a student for a long time, or living on an adjunct salary kind of under the threshold and you're not really sure, if you're new to this too, how much it really costs to live, like if you're living on student loans and other types of really low cost things, before you go into salary negotiations, again, really thinking about how much does it actually cost you to live. So we do have a sheet where you can calculate that has things like your insurance payments, your apartment, your car payments, your all the other things that we often don't really think about, so that you can get in fine detail and know that it costs me this much money per month to actually live, so that you aren't in a situation where you're worse off than you were before. But that also, again, involves knowing the industry as well, whether or not the jobs there do pay what you actually need to be able to. And then, the paying off the loans thing that comes into play at that point as well.
Yeah, that's going to be big in all of our minds as we tend to graduate. So also you want to think about, if you can't accept their offer, what's your bottom line? What's the minimum salary you're going to be able to afford to live off of? And we'll talk about, it's called a BATNA in the next slide or 2 slides down.
After you do an interview, you should have a better idea of whether or not you want the position. So if after the interview you've decided I really don't want to work for this company or I don't want this job, then when they call and they make the offer, you can politely decline and say it's not a good fit for you, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you don't want the position, then I wouldn't even bother planning negotiation with them. But do make a list if you decide you want it. What are a list of your priorities? And so if you've done research, you should have a ballpark of what the position is going to pay, but what's really important to you that you need to have in that job. So Lee at one point mentioned a flexible schedule. If that's really essential to you, or work from home options, or whatever the case happens to be, those are the things that need to be at the top of your list. So think about what's really important. How does this align with your values, so that you know what that is, and practice your initial response. I mean, in most cases, they're going to call you on the phone and tell you that you have the job. So you also want to make sure, if you haven't changed your voicemail already, that you have a good one. If you know the phone number, you might not want to answer it right away. Let it go to voicemail so that you can listen to the message and then you can call them back. If you do get them on the phone right away, try to maintain your composure, write notes, but also ask them for time. If you can avoid it, we'll talk about this more later, it's best not to negotiate at the time, but kind of practice your initial response just in case. So what are you going to say to them? And always keep in mind that this is a dialogue. And in some cases, one of the things you might want to find out beforehand is who you're going to be negotiating with. Sometimes it will actually be your future boss, but other times it's someone who's in human resources. So when you think about how that process goes, it's going to be very different how you're going to approach things and talk to your future boss as you were to someone in HR. Not that you talk to the HR person in a disrespectful way, but you don't have to worry about it's less awkward, I think, when the person isn't going to be your boss, to be able to negotiate and to press a little harder for things. So that might be something. But again, think about it as a dialogue. You're having a conversation with your future employer. So if you look at it that way and you're just asking about things, then that should hopefully help you alleviate some of the anxiety. Okay, so now after you receive the offer, like I said, first ask for time to consider before responding. Most places will call you, some email you. Actually, I worked with a couple students who got stuff through snail mail, but that's incredibly unusual anymore. So you're either going to get a phone call or something in writing. But if you get a phone call, you should ask for something in writing so that you can see it and make sure that you understand everything that you're agreeing to, so that if you've made your list of here are things that I want, that you know what you get, or what you're getting in that. And then that gives you time to really consider and think, okay, what do I want to ask about first? Is the salary the first thing, or what else do you want to look at? And so consider it carefully. Also, if you are in competition with other organizations, let's say you did an interview, you got an offer from an organization that you really like, but maybe isn't your first choice, and you're kind of waiting because you've already had an interview with another one, or you haven't heard, or even if the other one the interview hasn't been scheduled yet, or not, it's not scheduled, hasn't happened yet. There are ways that you can negotiate even for more time to consider the offer. So I have worked with people before who've had situations, so they've had an offer in hand, they've have an interview scheduled with another organization, and we've talked about how you can call the other organization to do one of two things: to let them know you have another offer, but you're really interested and strongly favoring their organization from what you know to date, and ask if they can push the interview up for you. That's one possibility. If not, then at least they know going into it that you have an offer from another organization. So that kind of sweetens the deal. It's like you're more wanted when other people want you, ironically. So that's something to think about. And then you could negotiate for more time. And that's a process of thinking about the right thing to say. I think employers like it when you present things of like, I've made a commitment to do this other thing and I need to do that. Very few will get aggressive and say, no, accept an hour, forget it. They usually work with you. And if you are in that process of play, organizations know who their competition is and so it actually could help them sweeten the deal. Say, hey, what if we give you these things? Then would you want to come and work for us? So, but let's say you've got two offers at the same time, then you also have to really think carefully about what those two offers look like. And if you're comparing apples and apples or apples and oranges. So again, as Lee mentioned, the same salary in a different location as a lower cost of living, you're not really comparing the same things exactly. So think about that. Again, a list of your priorities and consider your different scenarios. So if salary is not negotiable, and that's a good question to ask, to phrase it before you start: is this salary negotiable? And get the yes or no. Sometimes it's not. This is what the job pays, and this happens in a bunch of different industries. So if they say no, it's not, and you argue for more, then you're not going to be effective. And it's a different discussion of whether or not you think that salary is enough, because if it's not, then you can politely decline the offer. But if you can't get the salary you want, what are the other things that are important to you that would compensate for not having the salary that you wanted for that particular position? So again, make your list. And it's always a good idea to practice, talk through it, talk to yourself, talk to other people, work on those types of things. And whenever you make your counter offer, you always want to stay focused on your value added. I have these levels of experience based on the job description. Here are things that I can do right away. So nobody really cares if you want to have a nice house somewhere or a better apartment. That's not their concern. What they want to know is what you're going to add to the plate. So you need to focus on, here are the things that I can do. This is why you want to hire me. And this is why you want to pay me more, is because I can do these things for you.
One thing you have to realize is these companies, if you're asking for a little more time, they're not going to want to go through the whole process of interviewing someone new and negotiating salary with them too. So if you're asking for just a few days or a week of extra time to consider, they're really usually going to be agreeable to that.
Yeah.
Another thing on your BATNA's best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Think about, don't make this job your only option. What are your other options? You may not be thinking about this now, but maybe going back for more schooling, or looking for a different job, or sticking with your job now and looking for different ways to move up. Try and figure out different alternatives rather than just being solely set on this position.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's some other factors that you should consider when you're looking at positions. So the experience level of the position. So is it aligned with what your experience is? Are you going to grow in it? I think sometimes we're tempted to look for things that are a good match for what we can already do, but then you're not going to develop more skills. So if it's too much like I already know how to do all of this stuff, then you're not going to grow. Also, employer size. I've talked to enough recruiters to learn that larger employers, ironically, often have less wiggle room, and smaller companies sometimes have more opportunities. And so I worked with a lot of people who ended up in the tech industry, and LinkedIn, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, they all have kind of a basic package that they give all their entering software program engineers. And I'm sure they do that for all the other things too. They do that so that you're not arguing over nickels and dimes between LinkedIn and Facebook, but that you're going to whichever company really is a fit for you. So that's something to think about, that they might be stuck. And then also organizations consider salary compression. This is something that happens actually in academic jobs. As salary goes up, you have people that have been working there for a long time making less than incoming people. So industry is concerned about that too, in benchmarking. Also, you can negotiate a job title. I worked with someone who was changing careers, and the job title was too close to what his current one was, and since he was trying to redefine himself, it wasn't working, so he argued and got a different title that helped him move in a different direction. Also, the timing and conditions of raises. The reason that you want to try and get the salary up front is because generally raises are based on a percentage of your current salary. Like you get a 2% or a 3% raise. So if your salary is lower than 2%, yeah, it's something. But if you got a higher starting salary, you could get more. And whether or not, these are things you can find out, do they only do those kinds of percentage increases, or are there opportunities for merit-based raises? So different things that might come into play. And then I also think it's really important to think about the company's culture. Having a job you like in a place you hate is not good. It's better than having a job you hate in a place you hate, but not as good as having a job you like in a place you like. So when you think about the culture of the company, that might be something. In fact, I tell people a story of I turned down a job offer for a tenure track position at a school that all the faculty just whined the whole time I was there. They were so miserable. And I thought, I don't want to work with these people. Yeah. So I said, thank you, but no thanks.
Yeah, I can talk about company culture too, because I try to negotiate bonuses as a supervisor for one organization out here in California. And I was told, no, there are no bonuses. This is a family company. And so nobody else but their immediate family was part of that structure. So I did not work there. Some other things you can really consider, you really do need to consider, financial health of employers. I was offered almost a six-figure salary more than 10 years ago, almost 15 years ago now, with an organization, which sounded great, except 6 months later they went under. So they were really desperate for help and wanted someone out there. Some of the industry trends I can talk about from my experience too. I worked in Domino's for many years, and going to the other competitors, you've seen what Papa John's has done in the past few years with their CEO trashing it. So look at the industry. You don't want to be someone going into the newspaper industry right now, for instance. Look at salary versus your total compensation. So you have to consider those other factors we talked about. Talk about your health compensation, your other benefits, some of the perks you may get. Look at how much it's going to cost you to live in that other state versus California. Some of the things that on the bottom there, it says loan forgiveness. If you're working for a nonprofit or a government organization, after 10 years, they will forgive what's left of your student loans. And that can become, hopefully, that can become a big factor when you're considering where you want to work. Also look at growth opportunities too. That was one reason I left the industry I'd been in for so long, because I had really reached the ceiling of where I could go within those organizations.
Yeah, and then actually for the loan forgiveness, there are some for-profit companies that are actually considering that now because of all the talk about how high student debt is. So even if you're going to a for-profit company, they might have some program to help pay off some of your student loans. So again, things to ask about. So, some common mistakes that people make when negotiating. First is accepting the first offer. So, when they get you on the phone and you're all excited, you can say, "That sounds really interesting, and I look forward to spending some more time thinking about it." So, don't say yes right away, because once you say yes, you accept, the negotiation's done. So, you can have a, "That sounds nice. I need a little bit more time to just think about it to make sure I understand all the conditions," but don't say yes until you're really ready to say yes.
And one thing that research has shown is that try and set the anchor. If you set the anchor, it's going to be usually going to be if you've done your research, a little bit higher of a point, and you're operating from that anchor. If you let the organization set the anchor, they're usually going to set it lower, and that's the number you're working from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why it's actually a good thing when to kind of be vague as much as possible when they give you the offer, to just to say, "Hey, is it negotiable?" And if they say yes, then you have to get into the other dialogue. But I'm really great at strategizing for that. So come in and we'll have a conversation. So also, you want to have realistic expectations. Again, some industries, some positions, like the nonprofit industry, does not tend to pay really high salaries. So depending on what you need, it could be that the job just isn't something that pays what you're expecting for the particular position. Letting your ego get in the way, which kind of goes with that. Sometimes it's hard to kind of divorce. And sometimes when somebody says this is the salary for the particular position, again, you need to think, is it growth? Is it my first position? Maybe it's not great, but you're there for a year and that helps you get the next position. So what are you getting out of it? Besides just the salary piece of it, and then think to yourself, is this something that allows me to get to where I'm going? Especially with consulting jobs, some of the top consulting firms will hire people from a bachelor's program or for a PhD program, but they don't find much use for master's students, especially if you don't have a lot of experience somewhere else. And so you might, if you want to work at McKinsey, that might not be your first job in consulting. You might need to do something else to develop the credibility, the skill set to then be competitive for McKinsey. So think about those. And sometimes we let the past impact us. So if you haven't negotiated before, or you negotiated and it didn't go really well for you, be careful going forward, but don't opt out of it just because it didn't go well before. I have had students that have had exploding offers before, design by now, and that typically is a red flag. So it's probably a good thing if you don't take that offer, but really give some thought to that.
But letting your ego get in the way too. You may want to consider positions that normally hire, like in those consulting firms, normally hire bachelor's degrees, if they will let you apply for those, because a lot of those positions start off at $70,000 or $80,000 a year. And the thing about having your master's degrees, you'll have skills those bachelor's degrees won't have, so it'll allow you to move up quicker within that organization too.
So let us help you schedule an appointment for negotiation assistance. You can do that in Handshake, or if you don't find a time in Handshake that works for you, feel free to reach out to us and ask us about that. And you should actually get help sooner rather than later. The sooner you start doing this, better. So before you even get an offer, because once you get an offer, you'll be like, oh my God, I got to do this now. So as you start interviewing, you're doing the research, you're trying to figure out come in and talk about negotiation strategy, just to have a conversation and be prepared for when it does happen for you, so that you're not, last minute trying to get an appointment or get something figured out. And then also we have other resources for you. So Big Interview to help you practice interview. On our YouTube channel, we actually have 2 short things we call career bites based on negotiating. One is called Deciphering the Offer Letter, and the other one is called Negotiating the Offer. Both of those are less than 10 minutes long. that talk about some of the negotiation things that we've discussed here in a little bit more detail. We have workshops, we have webinars, we have all kinds of events. And so we really hope that you will come and see us and let us help you, and that you'll connect with us through Handshake, Facebook, and watch our YouTube channel. And we hope to see you soon.
Just one quick thing. The two appointments we see least of are mock interviews and salary negotiations. So, and those can really become very important pieces of your career search. So please come and see us.
Yes, if you don't interview well, you never get the offer, so you won't get a chance to negotiate. And then if you do interview well and you get a chance, you get an offer, you really want to be prepared for negotiation. So thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you soon. Okay, so now it's time for questions. So let me pull up. I just wanted to make that pause since we're recording this. And so let's see what questions we have so far. And if you'd like to turn your mic on and speak instead of typing, that's totally fine as well. I had a hard time hearing Lee. Oh, hopefully that worked. I have a question. Is it worthwhile to tell employers that you don't have kids? No, don't mention that, because employers are not supposed to ask you whether you have kids. They're not supposed to consider that in making offers. And unfortunately for women, if you don't have kids now, they'll assume you're going to get married and have them someday. So I wouldn't even go there. So you got to hope that the workplace is going to become less sexist at some point, or that people are going to realize that sometimes women with kids have a partner who also chips in. But yeah, telling them you don't have kids is not going to necessarily help your case. And since it's information that they should not consider, it might make them a little bit uncomfortable. If you bring that up.
Yeah, they really shouldn't even be asking if you're married.
They're not supposed to be thinking about any of that stuff. They're supposed to be thinking about whether or not you can do the job. Right. And anything that happens outside of work is none of their business. What are your thoughts on negotiating a salary at a startup? Lots of them. Yeah. Again, this is something you have to think about, is how well funded is the startup? Do they have some backers? Do they have enough money they can pay you? How many people are there? If you work for a startup, there's bonuses sometimes for that, in that you're going to be a Jill of all trades. So you'll get to wear a lot of different hats and learn a lot of different things. More so than when you're in a large organization, you're hired for one particular role and you kind of stay in your lane. There is often more volatility to it. If they don't have good funding, then sometimes it's kind of tricky, and it might be, we don't have enough money for paychecks this month. So that would be something to think about. But again, if it's something that does take off, and you are on the ground floor, it can be very lucrative.
I would still do your research on similar positions in other organizations, right. And maybe you can start off on the low end of the scale, or even below that range. It depends on what you can live off of and what the end results are. If they're offering you a certain amount of stock options, I mean, they have no value really in a startup yet, mm-hmm. But you have to know what you can live off of.
Right. Yeah, and some of the startups don't necessarily pay tremendously less. I mean, again, I guess it depends on what they're starting up with and what they're doing and how funded they are. But yeah, it's important to really kind of think about that. And again, is the job a fit for you? Do you like the people that you're going to be working with? Again, because there's benefits and drawbacks to working with an organization that's got 10 or fewer people and one that has hundreds. So if you're working with 10 or fewer, you better make sure you can enjoy spending a lot of time with them, because mm-hmm. There's nowhere to go to hide.
Yeah, and there's benefits too. You'll have much more voice within the organization and direction on where the company is going to go.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Anybody else have any other questions? There was somebody who asked, I don't know if they're listening right now, but what if you get an embarrassingly low offer? That's kind of a challenge because I don't know what you consider embarrassingly low. But if you do your research beforehand, then the salary they offer shouldn't be a total surprise to you. But if it is, again, this is where you can't let your ego get in the way. So don't let your first reaction be like, you got to be kidding me, and then hang up the phone. But that's where you would ask questions about whether or not the salary is negotiable, or listen to everything that they're offering you. Again, when you're looking at the whole package, does it make sense? And if they do say that the salary is not negotiable, and that's what it is, and that's something that you can't live on, then you just figure out a polite way to express that. I'd really love to take the job, but I'm not able to take a position at that salary level. And people will understand. I mean, people who have lower paying positions tend to know that they're below market. And so sometimes that even comes up earlier. Employers sometimes will, I think especially ones that know that they don't pay as well as some of their competitors or others, might have that conversation with you earlier in the process so that you don't get to the point where you really want, or they really want you, and then they can't agree on salary. Nobody likes that.
And I can tell you, if someone is trying to offer you an embarrassingly low salary like that, that may not be an organization you want to work for anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I had to turn down positions because I knew that it just wouldn't be a viable situation for me. So.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's part of what you think about in this whole process. Just because somebody offers you a job doesn't mean you have to take it. Mm-hmm. I mean, there might be a lot of reasons why you think it's not right for you. And that's okay. An employer would rather have you tell them up front that for whatever reason, I've just decided. So the school I turned down, I just told them, I think at that point, my husband got a job somewhere else. So yeah, I'm kind of moving to a different state, so that's not going to work. But because I didn't want to tell them the real reason, that they had whiny faculty. But you figure out a polite way to let someone off in that situation that is just not a good fit, or whatever the case happens to be, to let them down easy, and then they'll go to the second person on the list. And again, when you're thinking, most people really want to work with you because they really, really like you. Okay, what if you really need a job, especially right out of graduate school? Well, again, when you work with us early in the process so that you can be well prepared for what's going to happen. And ideally, if you've done all the work, you know what the salaries are, you know what the organizations are that you want to work for, and you've built up your experience so that you are a really excellent candidate and you have a lot of things in your bag of tricks to offer them, you can argue for successfully a higher salary. And so you need to think and plan for all those things. And then, when you're looking at those and thinking about, I really need a job, you also need to think about, again, all the other things that are involved in that. So if you know what the salary is for the type of position you're looking for, and it's a match and it's close enough, that's great. Again, most companies do benchmarking, so they're not going to offer you lower than what their competitors are. But again, there are some fields you might. So I'm surprised sometimes when students I've worked with think that faculty jobs pay a lot more than they do. And that's something that's really field specific. In fact, here I've worked with a number of students from DBOS, and they actually look for jobs that are in business schools rather than in psychology departments, because business school jobs pay better. Mm-hmm. That's a reality. So you can make 65 as a entering faculty person, 65, 70 in a psych department, but you could be like 80 or 90 if you go into a business department. Excuse me. So there are variations. If you're in humanities, you're just, you're not going to make a lot of money. That's unfortunate. But different fields will pay differently even for faculty jobs. Mm-hmm. But that's not the most lucrative career. But yeah, we want to help you make sure that you get into a good position, because you already have enough financial stress going to graduate school, and you're not going to be successful in your position if the conditions aren't right. Or again, even the opposite, making a lot of money doesn't compensate for working for an awful boss, coworkers you can't stand, and doing a job that just drives you crazy. So in fact, Lee got his master's here because he didn't want to do what he had been doing for a long time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it doesn't, getting paid, close to six figures doesn't make up for the fact that, I was working basically two people's jobs at 90 hours a week. So.
Yeah. Yeah, there is that work-life balance piece. And the thing to consider, the more money you make, the less control you have of your time. And so you have to think of that equation. Is that something that you want to, I want to make a lot of money, but you're not going to have a lot of time. And sometimes, like with consulting, people will do that for 3 to 5 years and then burn out because it's just too intense, and they have no time to spend with friends or family. Any other questions? All right, it looks like nothing else here. So, oh, wait. Oh, nope. Great. Thank you. You're very welcome.
Thank you.
And again, this is a really personalized experience. So please do feel free to come in and talk with us about your situation, your comfort level with asking for things that you haven't been offered. And we can work with you to create a strategy that works for you. And again, to look at your situation, your conditions, and help you figure things out. Also, if you want, I mentioned the handout to figure out salary needs. So if you would like that, if you just send me an email, I can send you the document so that you can start looking at and thinking about how much money you actually need to be able to live. And then all the extra is the gravy. All right, so we hope to see you soon, and thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Take care.
Bye.